don't ever let someone tell you that you don't get to have access. Look, if the door is not open, go through the window. Find an opening somewhere. It may not be straight through the front door. And I think that as Black folks, as people who have had to navigate this country very differently, or the world very differently, I think that we have to find our way around, right? We need to know the rules of the game, but then we also have to learn how to play the game.
Compost and cotton and cornrows.
Welcome to the Compost, Cotton, and Cornrows podcast. I'm your host, Dominique Drakeford, and this is where Black vanguards are redefining sustainability through storytelling. Today's guest is Sherrell Dorsey, a climate tech strategist and narrative architect who makes it plain. Story-shaped narratives, monetary access builds power, and we have to be at the center of designing our own future. Take a breath, get your notepad, and get ready to rethink the moves we make. Let's get into it. And you're like this sustainability unicorn, and I can't wait for our conversation.
I'm so excited to be here. I feel the exact same way about you.
Thank you. Thank you. So to ground us in today's dialogue, I'd love to know how you define sustainability.
Yeah, honestly, I really define it as a return to self, a return to the principles of those who came before us, who understood that the earth, it's our lungs, right? And our responsibility for living here responsibly within an ecology that works for everyone. It's not just a nice to have, right? It is how I always say, like, listen, if the planet is healthy, we're not healthy. And so that's where I define sustainability. Obviously, there's a lot of scientific and corporate language, but it really just boils down to, if we want healthy lives, if we want healthy generations, we want healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy spirits, we have to honor what this earth gives us, and we have to take care of it.
It's that return piece hit me. But yeah, like you lifted up, it's this, we're tethered to Mama Earth, and we have a symbiotic relationship. And so getting back to that point where we know and understand and move with that intentionality 100%. And Sherrell, look, you're a professional storyteller, but just when I'm thinking about just climate tech and journalism, you're a real journalist. And just media entrepreneurship, how
Yeah.
do you feel like your life experiences of place and
Yeah.
culture shaped how you show up as a storyteller?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I never get this question. I
Yes!
never get this question. And it's like,
Yeah.
when did my villain origin story begin? You know what? I was privileged to be born and raised in Seattle, Washington. And so
Me
by
too.
default, yeah. Wait, back up.
I was raised in
But you were
Oakland.
born,
I was
you were born
born
in
in
Seattle.
Seattle. My grandma was she was a principal at Garfield.
You've got to be kidding me. Okay.
Okay, but
That's it. That's
okay,
it. It's
right?
yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute.
See, I knew this is why I liked you. Let me see that. And
Okay,
grandmother was
so
a bulldog.
you were born with the rainy and the
Right. Right.
okay.
Right. I love that your grandmother was a bulldog too. So we'll
Yes,
we'll we'll kiki
100% a
about that
bulldog.
later.
Yes.
Um and so I preference that because my childhood was filled with such a diversity of people and cultures, right? Seattle has a tremendous Asian population. It was established and really built up from the native population. Black folks started coming and settling, with jobs like longshoreman jobs, the military, when Boeing and all of these large, companies started to hire people. This was like, I want to say late 1940s, early 1950s. So my grandfather got a job at Boeing as an aircraft technician. So there's this like amalgamation of history and people, and all of that interconnected by, I think, the root of, like, Seattle's named after Chief Seattle, right? And like we grew up going to, the Museum of Native American History, and learning about the agricultural practices, learning about the water. We're surrounded by mountains. You really appreciate nature when you grow up in a place where you're surrounded by water, you're surrounded by mountains. So much of even your school curriculum is focused on environmental education, focused on hiking, camping, fishing, horseback riding. That was my childhood, right? In addition to going to learn how to program in high school, working at the Microsofts of the world. And so I've always had this hybridic sense of innovation, culture, respect for, those who came before us. And so that's where my villain origin story began. And when I got to New York for school, I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology for undergrad. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to marry this idea of both art as well as technology. And FIT gave me the cultural experience and expansion to understand how do people engage with design, how does human psychology work toward an aesthetic, right? How do you teach through material? How do you teach through textile? And I was also attending lectures at other schools, going up to NYU, going up to Columbia, learning about the toxins in cosmetics and the chemicals within our communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, where the studies were showing that from everything from relaxers to, the stuff you're getting at the 99-cent store is crossing into your endocrine system, right? So young girls were starting puberty, before they reached double digits. And it was this crazy epidemic. And I said, well, how do I start to bring knowledge to this? Right. And I worked for some beauty brands. I worked for a startup that was creating non-toxic skincare products for those who were going through cancer treatments. And it opened up this world of we can solve problems through returning back to natural ingredients and finding ways to be regenerative towards the earth, right? And I took a couple, global sustainability classes and things like that in undergrad. But I recognized that as social media was rising, as like it was like the blogosphere. So folks were creating their own media platforms.
Yep.
Black Enterprise gave me my first shot at, publishing and covering stories related to climate justice, sustainability, and the opportunity of sustainability within innovation. And so there was this perfect storm of I want to inform, I want to alert, but I also want to provide solutions and I want to tailor them in a way that connects with people. So I had this blog, Don't Laugh, Girl, Don't Laugh. It was called Organic Beauty Vixen. So that was like during the era of like the
Remember?
Vibe Vixen days,
Oh, I
right?
remember.
It was during the era of the Vibe Vixen days. So everything was like a
Mhm.
vixen, video vixen, Vibe Vixen, all of that. And I was a Vibe Vixen like years,
Mhm.
years ago, which
Mhm.
my friends like always like get on me about. So but I wanted people to see like you could live this beautiful aesthetic life, but also here's ways in which how you purchase, how you
Right.
live, how you contribute, it affects the planet and it affects your health. But there's so much opportunity to explore, and there's so many ways to become a creator or a business owner, or and to have these principles. If you want to be a designer, you want to build a beauty brand, you can do this in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Um, and so the amalgamation of all of my lived experiences, they were rooted in community. My mother
Mhm.
was very much like, as a kid, I was canvassing. Her friends were all like politicians and senators and mayors. And like I grew up, spending time with Seattle's first Black mayor and his wife, who are still like really good family friends to this day. And so I think about how much emphasis my mom had on my childhood on understanding our greater role in society and in caring for not just our communities, but also our planet. And so I feel so fortunate. And that's why I'm so passionate about this space, because I feel like many times we lose the plot,
Yeah.
lost the plot, right? Our voices in some ways have been drowned out, but we also have these tools, these new tools that continue to evolve and to emerge. And I find myself, and this might be true for you as well, also having this like tech experience, like you're drawn to, oh wow, like I can create things out of nothing, technology is a gateway, but also the industry itself is primed for exploitation, right? Versus how do we solve real problems? How do we actually honor people, communities, transitions as we advance technologically? So I've always felt this this kind of luminary space of
Mhm.
charge. I'm like, I'm this and I'm that. And I feel like I'm fighting a force here, and I'm trying to bring this side up a lot more, to use these tools to their advantage. And so yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but when I look back, I'm like, wow, all these threads were connecting.
Yep.
Single thread was connecting.
It's interesting too because as I continue to evolve in the space, I'm constantly thinking about these intersections of fashion, of beauty, of tech, of healing, of wellness, of systems, of local and global impact, like all the things. And coming from a space where I guess my wheelhouse started in fashion, and I
Mhm.
feel like I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember that you had a deep reverence in the fashion and beauty space before the pivot to more, tech and innovation and storytelling. I am correct in that.
It was a it was an era.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was an era
It was an era,
for
and
sure.
so yeah, and so so that was so much a part of my life. Now, what changed was, I graduated, I wanna say from undergrad in 2010, so it was like the
Mhm.
heart of the recession. So just things were weird, right?
Yeah.
Things were really strange,
100%.
and I was seeing all these tech companies really shift the world, right? Like Uber come out with 2011. I had been back in Seattle and was using their Black car service. You were seeing Airbnb gain ground, and it was like, wow, there's a way to disrupt these spaces through
Mhm.
technology. And again, I had a tech background. In high school, I was learning how to program at the Technology Access Foundation.
Mhm.
And every summer I worked at Microsoft. And, my family was very disappointed that I did not study computer science.
Mhm. Mhm.
However, I was like, I knew that I needed some holistic experiences
Right,
because
right,
I
right, right.
had the art brain and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, it was very unconventional, very nonlinear path. But I would walk into the museum at FIT, and I mean, I want to say there were just these beautiful exhibits in history of, like, materials and how materials had dictated your social status, right? Or the
Mm.
first time, what's his name? Rucci put a woman in pants on the runway, right? Like that was like revolutionary, a woman wearing pants, and how much that shifted culture. And for me at the time, like 19 years old, was like thinking about how do we shift culture through storytelling, and then technology in and of itself, like it all bleeds into other things. Like when I was with Norma Kamali, I remember this was when Fashion Week was now being moved from the tents at Bryant Park over to Lincoln Center. Like that's how mature I am. Is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
tent still
yeah.
existed. However, Norma Kamali was starting to think about, well, what if we had a virtual fashion show via social media?
Mm.
Right? Like, how do we start to use this technology within this realm and within this space? And then how do we tell a story about what we're about? And so, yeah, there was just this blended sense of, I started off in Seattle in tech, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
got the Black to Microsoft scholarship. They grounded me so much. Got to New York and understood that, like, design moves the world, storytelling moves the world. You can't sell things without having the story, right? And the best storytellers, I
Mhm.
believe, are fashion brands, and fashion across the board. We're not just talking about apparel. We're talking about furniture, interiors, right?
Mhm.
Color. FIT at the time, I don't know if this is still true. FIT had the only color theory library in the
Yeah.
world.
Oh, they did. Mhm.
Like the reps from Pantone would come and do
Yep.
research. Like, it was a big deal. And so for me, that kind of inspiration, and like Calvin Klein would come down and lecture, and Giorgio Armani and Betsy Johnson, and like all of these incredible entrepreneurs who've had these amazing, it was like story was at the root of every single thing.
Very true.
And when you thought about selling, when you thought about, oh, I remember Norma Kamali was really good friends with Horst Horst Aveda, founder of Aveda, and then
Mhm.
subsequently Intelligent Nutrients.
Mhm.
And she had this, now we will call it a podcast. Back then, it was just a series of videos. She called it Conversations. And I remember like Twyla Tharp would come in and like all of these incredible just creatives, right?
Mhm.
Who
Mhm.
were phenomenal business people. And they would, I mean, they were philosophers.
Mm.
They were, conscious about the world. And, a horse was all about Ayurvedic medicine and principles, and that's what he built into the brand, and like balancing and all these things now that are like, my 5 a.m. ritual and all that kind of stuff,
Yep,
right?
yep, 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 yep.
And I couldn't articulate it back then, Dominique, but what I understood was these people use and leverage story to sell a world that they built, right? As storytellers, as journalists, we are world builders.
Mhm.
And the reason why we are attracted to certain brands, the reason why we want and desire certain things, like, is because we are building our own worlds. And their foundational principles were rooted in, here are the philosophical principles, the humanitarian principles
Right.
that comprise of this tool, right? And this tool can lead you into a greater state of being or consciousness, whatever it is. And I started to connect those dots, and I was like, I could be a techie. I could sit in a dark room all day debugging software, which I like loathed, right?
Mhm.
I was like, but if I don't know how to sell and to appeal to people, I can never spread a story. And I think that's what the fashion industry taught me the most. And so it was kind of easy to go back into tech. So I worked for the Ubers of the world. I worked for the Google Fibers, because I saw like they're moving quickly. They've got something here that's changing the world, and I want to understand what this looks like. And then eventually I launched my own company, my own media platform. And so yeah, I mean, again, nonlinear pathway. I could not have told you like when I was a little girl, this is what I dreamed of. I was like,
Right,
let me try
right.
a couple of things,
Mhm.
and see where I can have some influence. And then it all started to come together.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I remember having a conversation way back when, and I can't even remember who I was having a conversation with. And looking back, just the bubble in New York especially was so small. But I remember speaking with somebody and they were like, "Yeah, Sherrell, she got up out of the sustainable fashion space real quick." And that has been in my head for so
Mm.
long, although we've never spoken
Yeah.
actually before.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But just following you and how you connected the dots and created your world based off of your expertise and experiences, it makes so much sense.
Also, Dominique, like, let's be honest too. Let's be real. The sustainable fashion space, especially back then,
Mm.
there was no space for brown girls.
Oh, no, 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 it wasn't, it wasn't.
There was
Let's
no
be
space. Like,
very there was
let's be super clear. If we think
let's
it's
be
already a
super
tad
clear.
bit exclusive,
Yeah,
like organic beauty vixen was, disruptive,
yeah,
at that
same,
time, right?
same.
Like to get the invites to be at like penthouses with like Burt's Bees and all
And
these kinds of
even
things. Like,
even when you get the invite, Cheryl, because even I had Melanin Ass at the time. And actually that was a little before I had my blog Melanin Ass, um, because the main blogs were like the eco cults and the things of that nature, right? Uh, when you get into the spaces, it was cold as fuck. So
yeah.
even once you got the invite, it took, like you said, didn't have the language at the time. Was it the language, the gumption? It took me a minute to be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm about to talk
Yeah. Yeah.
and and reimagine how I understand sustainability based off of what I'm seeing, but more importantly, based off of the culture that I know, right?
Yes. Yes. Because we always had the handle on the culture. And what was interesting is that, I was never begging someone to platform me. I was always
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
will
yeah.
create my own platform, right? And so, I remember going to South by Southwest Eco because they used to have their Eco
Mhm,
conference in the
mhm,
fall.
mhm, mhm.
And, I remember there being an entire like sustainable fashion panel And Summer Rain Oaks at the time was like the talk
Summer.
of the town,
Yep,
and,
yep, yep.
you know, all white panel talking about sustainability and fashion. And Summer Rain is like, well, we got to understand how like the fashion industry started, right? Like
Mhm.
it was because of slavery. Like we got to be a global superpower because we had, enslaved, forced labor,
Yep.
picking cotton, and we
Mhm.
became the world's number one producer of cotton. And she didn't have to get up there and say that,
She
right?
didn't. Shout out to
Especially in a
Summer.
room
She's the
of,
first book I read.
yeah, I was like, exactly, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Especially
yeah, yeah, yeah,
considering
yeah.
that this panel was designed and there was no one said, hey, we should have someone of color up here, right? And again, a lot of these spaces, and even going to these eco events, and actually, what's his name? He was like he's the farmer dude from Compton. What's his name? Ron something, the
Yeah, yeah,
Compton
yeah,
farmer.
yeah. He does
Because
the
he got up there and
storytelling.
he cussed
Mhm.
everybody out.
Yep,
He
yep.
cussed everybody out. Like, but he was really hot at the time.
Shout out to his
But
master
again,
classes. Right.
exactly, yes. And so I just remember like being at this conference, like, this is so disconnected. And this is
Mhm.
where the culture aspect is missing. It's like it was
Yeah.
very Whole Foods. It was very like cricket flour and all this. And I was just like, come on. This is
Yep,
absurd. And like you
yep.
have no representation. And the following year, I was like, all right, I'm gonna pitch a panel. I had like all of these different black and brown folks, young folks who had
Mhm.
been in this eco and environmental space. And, it was the first time they had a panel like this at the stage. So I feel like I've always been like, it's like you can't even just be the storyteller. You also have to build representation and visibility. And so for me, I didn't necessarily leave this space. I just
Yeah,
started to focus on I need to build up the skills to understand how the world is moving from a technological perspective.
yeah.
Um, but also the industry just wasn't ready to have those deeper conversations. And even now, right, we're just now acknowledging that African designers have been building sustainably for a very, very long time,
Right.
right? Like Lagos Fashion Week and the creator of that, she just got the Earthshot Prize, and obviously we just didn't have the distribution models as well to platform these amazing designers from across the diaspora who have used mango fiber, banana fiber, right? Pure cotton, pure linen, excellent craftsmanship, excellent tailoring. And so at any event, when you are multi-hyphenate, but then also you're like, all right, I got to earn a living and y'all are
That
playing
part.
games.
Nah,
Y'all
that's
are playing
real.
games
That's
at the end
real.
of the day.
What is the data showing in terms of what's innovative, who is getting funding, and where impact
Yeah.
is happening today?
I'll be honest with you,
Mhm,
everything is very skewed. This is a very different kind of year, right? We
mhm.
know that federal
Yep.
funding has been clawed back very drastically, the billions of dollars that was earmarked for incredible projects. And climate, climate funding is very broad, right? There's conservation, which is very different than green energy, right? Or carbon removal technologies. So the reality here's where it all boils down to. We already have all the solutions that we need. It's not even about reinventing the wheel. We have to fund and leverage and utilize the things that are already here and ensure that not only are those companies built, but those jobs are created. And unfortunately, the current administration is halting a lot of that progress, right? Even in those spaces and places where, people believed in this particular administration. So we're seeing that. We're seeing that across agriculture, right? We're seeing these farmers default on loans, and then we're also seeing kind of the rise of regenerative farmers, right?
Mhm.
And who are looking at different kinds of business models to be profitable, but also not overwork or completely deplete the soil on their land. So, from a data perspective, I think that there's so many moving parts, but I can speak to at least from the venture standpoint. We've seen so much more funding. We saw funding probably quadruple in the last 5 years around green technologies. I was just in San Francisco, particularly for a climate tech investor
Mhm.
like retreat. And there are everyone from your traditional venture capital to private equity to family offices that are doubling down in this area. And so there's so much on the horizon. You're starting to see more climate funds, whether it's called climate or not. It might be called, resiliency funds, mitigation funds. We know language right now is a challenge, right? So you got to kind of be careful with language. And so we're seeing, I think, that growth in that breadth. Does it outweigh some of the harm that's already being done. Like, is it enough? Is it quick enough for us to mitigate against some of these challenges? We don't know. We have no idea, but there's a relentlessness. And I think that's the part of the story that actually matters.
Yeah. Let me tug on this a bit. What would be your advice for communities who obviously have been historically excluded from both um, having their innovations visible
Yeah.
and investment, right? That cross-pollination intersectional point between innovation and investment, specifically for Black and brown communities. What advice do you have
Yeah.
for these folks who again are inherently
Yeah.
sustainable?
Yeah. I think a couple of things, and I think it's a very complex, question. And we kind of come to these questions all of the time, right? Because we're having to play catch up. We're having to like force ourselves into the rooms, to be acknowledged. I think there's a couple of things. I think the first is get in the game. Um, I did a project recently with GE Vernova, so General Electric's kind of green energy department or kind of initiative. And one of the things that they highlight is that there's like 30 million jobs going to be available by 2030 in the
Mm,
green energy space.
mm,
I would say we can spend more time on the problems of what we're not getting, or we can
mhm,
get to work
yep,
on entering as many doors as humanly possible. And we can be quiet about it too,
mm,
right? So whether that is, hey, maybe you're not going to go do a 4-year degree. However, maybe there's a trade program in HVAC, technology, heat pump installation,
mhm,
solar panel installation, and then you can create entire businesses out of that. That's like a what we call the green collar
mhm,
economy, right?
mhm.
Like you can create like everybody needs a roof,
Hmm.
right? Like
Was that a Dr. Van
last time I checked, everybody needed a roof. You
Mhm,
always got a roof to install something on, right? You always need a heat pump in your home, right? Or battery technologies that will conserve, your energy when the power goes out. At the end of the day, like natural disasters are going to increase. So
mhm,
there's lots of opportunity. So it's like spend time finding where's the opportunity, what kind of skills can I gain, what kind of opportunities can I take advantage of, what are the ways in which I can use maybe rebates or subsidies also to help benefit my household, right, and help reduce energy costs. What are the green technology companies and or funds or index funds that I can actually invest in so that I can have a piece of the pie, right, as
mhm,
these technologies continue to advance. So I think there's a lot of things to be proactive about participation. And then when it comes to the entrepreneurship and startup side, we know how the game works, right?
mhm,
And then the challenge with the climate tech space overall is funding is hard. VC dollars are not always right because you need slower capital. You need more patient capital because it may take you just 3 years just to build a device to extract carbon out of the air, right? That's not going to be a high growth, get 55 million users in 6 months, right? So I believe that the private capital funding environment is starting to adapt through tools like blended capital or braided capital, patient capital, elemental accelerator that's out there, in Oakland and in San Francisco. They have what they call a D safe. So instead of a traditional safe note, which you would raise, before raising like a Series A round, this provides some of that slower patient capital, right? So you're not scrambling to try to run your company like a traditional software company. You're like, I'm building like hard things that go in the ground, right? And so I need time to be able to build that. I was having a really great conversation with the founder, Black woman, who's building a cooling technology so that data centers don't have to use water, right? And then they can also reduce their energy costs.
wow,
And she just closed the pre-seed. I think the other thing is timeliness. Sometimes you got to know how to build the right thing at the right time. So you got to know how to shift and pivot quickly when you see the trend,
yeah,
to hop on the trend thoughtfully, know what skill sets that you have to bring to the table, right? You can be an angel investor. You might be able to go pitch yourself to work for one of these startups or provide some consulting services. I think there's so many opportunities to jump in, and it's like, don't ever let someone tell you that you don't get to have access. Just find whichever door, window. In J school we used to say, look, if the door is not open, go through the window. When we talked about like entering a story, go through the window. find an opening somewhere. It may not be straight through the front door. And I think that as Black folks, as people who have had to navigate this country very differently, or the world very differently, I think that we have to find our way around, right?
Yeah.
We need to know the rules of the game, but then we also have to learn how to play the game, and where am I gonna place my bets, and then also go back to our families and say, hey, here are the things that are going to be taking place over the next 5 years. Here's where we need to be making some investments. Or, hey, maybe we can pull some resources together. We know that we have this elderly person in our family and we want to keep their electricity bills down. Let's make sure we get the home retrofitted, right? Let's make sure we get, a heat pump upgrade, right? Let's make sure maybe we get an electric car because we don't want to be paying these gas prices. There's things that we can do. And so I guess my last bit of advice after this long-winded response is, just don't stay stuck. Keep
Yeah.
moving. Keep
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah. And yeah, it's easy to remain stagnant. And I think, oh, you lifted up so many great points just in terms of making sure that we stay unapologetically creative while, playing chess, understanding the rules of the game, paying attention to the economy, economics, but also what's happening culturally, right? Which means social media, trends,
Mhm.
analyzing all the things. You lifted up something interesting about the Black woman who you spoke with earlier about the data centers. And I wanted to get your input on this because I've spoken to, activists and advocates who are very anti AI, but I also speak to folks who are like, tech is the future, right? How do you reconcile or even interpret the tension between the environmental racism of tech
Yeah.
disruption and the
Yeah.
undeniable innovation that tech brings to climate justice? How do you interpret that?
I mean, this has always been the case, right? When the cotton gin came out and you had very little use for forced labor, right? That changed the way in which um, Black folks considered what survival looked like, right? And then, almost every evolution has eliminated or created issues for vulnerable communities. And so I want to acknowledge that. And I want to also acknowledge these folks who are in these communities who are doing the work to get things shut down, to get things moved, to come to the table from a policy perspective and say, hey, this is not right. Where I feel we have to be completely honest is that everyone is going to use AI. It is in everything.
Yep,
And it is
already
a tool. It is a tool
just
for
chatting.
economic mobility and progress. And if you can leverage it in this decade, just like social media, right? When social media bursts onto the scene, if you can leverage these things, number one, you're creating a different kind of opportunity in entrepreneurship. You're creating a different kind of opportunity from an employment perspective. And so the challenge is we're not stopping the train. We are not. The train has already left the building.
Yep,
We are 10 years too
full
late.
speed. Mhm.
We're 10 years too late. We're 10 years too late. We're 20 years behind from the digital divide and digital access challenge, right? We're just fighting for basic infrastructure, right? That's kind of always been the case. So I appreciate the work of the activists. I appreciate them continuing to be boots on the ground and to sit with the grandmothers and the kids and the single parents who are being affected, and their stories must be told and continued. Where I want us to start focusing our energy is on how do we be proactive? How do we start negotiating community benefit agreements? How do we start disrupting projects by saying, hey, we know you want to build a data center in this community. Here's what the effects are going to be. We're not going to just shut you down, right? And not be helpful. What we're going to ask for is we can design this better. We can design this so that it doesn't hurt us. But then we also want permanent jobs and guarantees,
Mm,
right? We want a community center, or we want every household in this neighborhood to have green energy of some sort. Maybe that's wind, maybe that's solar, whatever it is. I think that we have to get proactive about not always coming to the table ready to swing,
Mhm.
right? I think have that in your back pocket because
Yep, yep,
sometimes you
yep,
got to
yep.
fight.
Right.
But before it is being able to sit at the table to co-design and co-create and say, "Hey, listen." And I've watched this happen. I did a policy fellowship, and I've watched this happen. I've sat in the back rooms with very powerful people, with billionaires who made the decisions for entire communities, right? And I'm like, you have to have people who speak both language and who can be, and that's again the storytelling. Laurel Powell Jobs, this is at a conference at Elementals Impacts annual conference, mentioned that investors now are placing bets on investing in community infrastructure. And so ensuring that the startups that they fund have the resources to do community work. So for instance, these major projects that green energy projects that are happening like in Hawaii, it's a huge like testing space for renewable energy and green energy projects. And one of the challenges that startups were having was, they were getting pushback from the elders, from the grandmothers, from the communities, and it was stalling their projects. So it was like, okay, you pay on the front end for doing actual community work, for sitting down with people, for hosting dinners, for having conversations, for sitting in people's living rooms, and breaking bread and asking them, what do you need? What do you want? Let's have a design. Here's a design of what we're thinking, but we want to be cognizant that these are sacred lands for you. So how do we work together? And now that is so anti-startup because, as you know, in Silicon Valley, you just move fast and break things. And then these mofos see when they try to break things, people come to swing,
Yep,
right? They come to throw hands.
yep.
And then it ends up costing them much more money because of the disrespect. And so I want us to remember that we still have power. But we have to wield that power with precision. We gotta be like Olivia Pope,
Mm,
right? Like, walk
mm,
in there like Olivia Pope, like, "Okay, we know you're gonna do this. We know that it can displace X, Y, and Z people, so here's
mhm,
what we need. Here's the amount of affordable housing that we're gonna want. We're the developers at the table. We can organize, you know, and help you get this project pushed through in the right way, if
mhm.
it's designed well, and also, we want, XYZ and equity. That's the part we haven't figured out how to negotiate.
Okay, so
So
strategy.
I think there's strategy, right? Sometimes we move reactionary. We move from a reactionary standpoint, and I
Right.
think that we have to, as a people, start to consider how can we respond versus react, but also
Mhm.
how do we get ahead of the game by ensuring that we have the right representatives and right representation at the table who can negotiate on our behalf before a shovel is even in the ground
That
when
part.
these things happen.
Mm. Does that speak to okay. All of this being said, where is the rubric, right? The strategic rubric, the guidelines, like who is lighting the compass for us to collectively be able to cross pollinate with the politicians, with the historians, with the grandmas, with
Yeah.
the scientists, so that we come as a united force about our business,
Yeah.
ready to, have this innovation economy in our
Yeah.
favor?
Yeah.
And that's a loaded
Oh,
question, probably.
it's such a loaded question. However, there are references and resources that we can turn to.
Mhm,
There are projects around this country that have had successful community benefit agreement negotiations. So I
mhm,
would say to start there and to kind
right,
of tap into your own research to look at what cities, what towns have seen successful, public, private, and community partnership.
mhm,
I remember, like the Harlem Economic Development Corporation,
mhm, mhm,
Columbia, my alma mater, as a history of taken over and buying up Harlem, right? And that's been very controversial for a long time. And so, these community centered economic development spaces and places like, being at the table to say, hey, here's what we need. We need senior housing. We need this. We need jobs. We need X, Y, and Z. We need X amount of our kids to go to this fancy little private school that you want to build with this building, right? Um, and there are a plethora of examples of how to get in and how to
mhm.
negotiate, and how to, at the end of the day, like, folks don't want the
Real
public
quick,
relations nightmares. Oh,
I
yeah,
have a
yeah.
baby Tim, Tim. Can you hear that?
Yeah, so
One
adorable.
second.
You better go get that baby. That sounds so cute. Little pumpkin. That is so cute. Aw.
Sorry about that.
No
Actually, let
worries.
me
No
stop
worries.
apologizing. I'm a whole ass mom.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely not.
off.
Yeah, no, we're just talking about there's a plethora of examples and
Right,
strategies,
right,
and I
right.
think that we should start looking at these examples. I used to write for Next City,
Mhm,
nextcity.org, City Lab as well, and City Lab was purchased by Bloomberg, but it still runs, and so they have solutions-oriented journalism around cities and equitable cities, and so there are case studies that already exist, and we just have to continue to rinse and repeat for
mhm,
sure. And also, I think that what we've seen even from like Mamandi's race, right? We
mhm,
need more
mhm.
young people
Yeah,
to be in positions of power and to cultivate political power because we also know that that moves the needle and there's so many moving parts from a policy perspective and so um there's not just one answer.
right.
It's getting involved. It is, it's being part of these councils. It's going to city council meetings they're dry and they're boring, and I totally get it.
Mhm,
But a lot of times these projects are being presented years in advance. And by the time most communities start to hear about it, it's already been decided. So even if you can just pop in, I think most of these are virtual now, just like read the minutes
mm,
what developers are coming in to start having conversations. That's going to tell you what they're planning to build, right? City plans, it's going to tell you. So it really is a civics sort of infrastructure that we need to get familiar with. And then we have to strengthen institutional power, right? And that means like, hey, you're gonna have to volunteer. You're gonna have to go and become part of the Economic Development Council or maybe attend an event, right? Or, be on or join and be a member of your local art museum, right? So that you can ensure that the installations are reflective of community. So I think we all have to do our part because institutions themselves profiteers themselves, they're not gonna hold the line, right? They're trying to make money. That is what they're
those are extractive and
Yeah,
exploitative
and
in
I think that
nature.
we just have to stop expecting this
Right,
benevolence. Like,
right, right.
let's just call a spade a spade.
100%.
It's gonna run out, right? And I think too, again, moves as we see, money moves power. It's
Mhm,
all correlated. So I think that at least for myself, Dominique, and I think the things that I hope to pass down are understanding the infrastructure of power.
mm,
And having a voice at the table also means having the skills and the language and knowing their language and knowing your language and knowing what you want when you walk into the room. And that goes for anything in life, not just, community organizing activism, particularly in this climate tech space. You have to know exactly what are you asking for when you walk into any room. And, I am in a world in which, I'm building my next startup in the climate media space. And I walk into these spaces as majority of the time the only Black person or the only Black woman. And I have to be so clear on my messaging. I have to be so clear on what um what I understand about how they fund and who they fund and give them no option but to consider me for that room and for that table.
mm,
And also relationships matter. And I think we need to remember that relationships matter at the end of the day. Like, we have to build our coalitions through relationship building because what happens, particularly within policy, is groups are dehumanized, right? We see that now. We see the calling of immigrants aliens, right? Because if we don't see them as human beings, then we can do whatever we want to, right? We saw that in slavery, right? We saw that in all of these like atrocities. And so the reason why the storytelling must be embedded and I think that we have to also not confuse it. Storytelling isn't just the podcasts, right? It's not just the threads, right? It's not just that. It is an embodiment of the stories that we carry, and we have to know which story to pluck out, right?
Mhm.
That's what the griots did. They knew which story to pluck out for the right time, right? The
Yep.
wisdom that comes in that. And
Mm.
so being able to walk in with the right story, with the right pitch, with the right argument, the well-researched, right? Understanding what the data looks like so that you can speak to the data and have the competency,
Mm.
and at the end of the day, like, I know that the older folks in my family, like, they don't care nothing about this. They're just like, I'm trying to make sure that I am okay in retirement, right? Very practical things. Very, very practical things. And so I think that's the part of like the sales, right, that you have to understand, which is, what does this customer want? What does that customer want? This customer wants to make sure that they can pay their light bill. So I'm not going to tell them a story about carbon recapture
Yeah.
because they don't care about that. They
Speaking
don't
to
give
their
they don't
interest.
give a shit about
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
But if I say,
Mm.
"Hey, if you come on to this council meeting, the thing that we want to make sure is that those energy bills are reduced by 30% and saving
Mm.
you," that's a very different kind of conversation. So again, there's so much.
There's so much. It's layered. Yeah.
So overwhelming. And sometimes, and I'm sure you kind of can relate to this. It's just like it can be overwhelming. And I try to choose my corner of the world. I try to have these conversations where I can, in the rooms in which I'm in, and particularly, representing myself and my community, um, but also offering us an opportunity to say, well, what if we also build something ourselves? What
Yeah.
could it look like? What could
Mm.
that look like? Because it might just be a regenerative, agricultural, or hydroponic, you know, I don't know, a small urban farm, right? That like
Mhm.
the community feeds the community. I don't know. I don't know what that might look like.
Yeah.
However, the as long as we're breathing, as long as this earth still exists, we have an opportunity to turn things around, right? And granted, again, we still have to create safety and protection for our communities as well. And so I don't want to take that away. And I think there's probably true climate activists who have a better understanding of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's complex, and we all just have to be at the table, I guess is my whole takeaway at the end of the day.
Mic drop. We done. Mic drop. Mic drop. Just thank you for blessing the podcast, with
Thank
your
you for having me.
brilliance, your
Thank you.
leadership, your
Thank you.
futurist ass fire. You're such a gift to community and global culture.
Listen, I
Like, for
sit on the
real, I can
shoulders
sit
of
here and give you all these flowers. Like, your insights really illuminate our pathways forward, and so I'm very
thank you.
appreciative.
And same, sis, same.
Thank you,
Thank you for
thank you,
doing what
thank
you're
you.
doing. Thank you for calling
Yes,
the things out. I'm
yes.
always sharing your stuff like,
Thank
"Yes,
you, yes.
absolutely, say
And
it, say it, say
let's not forget
it."
about them quotes you be dropping. Them quotes. Okay, you might need a
I be
quote book
trying.
for
Oh,
real.
listen,
I
listen.
love a good quote, and you drop the gems. I'm like,
I
"Oh,
try. I do my
queen
best. I think
quotes."
we're all doing our work, and that's it. We're all doing our work
100%.
and also taking good care of ourselves as well. So
100%. That's the
yes,
nucleus
yes, no.
of it. And to close out, what I'm doing this season is called, the sustainability soundtrack. So I'm just gonna do some quick rapid fire questions for you.
Oh, okay.
All
Let's do
right.
it.
What song is bringing you joy right now?
My gosh, I have been all about the Olivia Dean
Mm.
album. And, gosh, she has so many good hits on this most recent album. But she has a song called Lady Lady, and
Okay.
it's all about the transformation of self
Okay. I haven't
as we
heard it. Imma
evolve
have to
as women. Crack it
Lady
open
Lady.
today,
Okay,
please.
okay. All right. What song helps you heal when you are feeling hella heavy?
Every morning, I listen to 2 songs, so I'm gonna give you 2.
Okay.
Your Power by Lecrae and Tasha Cobbs. When I'm in my deepest and darkest of places, I
Mm.
put that song on and it lifts me. And then this young woman, Tarian, whose music I just discovered, she has a song that says "He sees you."
Mm.
Now, whether you are, a believer or not, is a beautiful uplift of being seen and that you are seen and you are here for a reason, and none of all that past stuff matters.
Yes.
So. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
my 2 favorites.
Okay, thank you. Adding that playlist, the mixtape. And the last one is, what song to you sounds like sustainability?
Ooh, oh,
Mm.
I love this. Oh
Mm.
my gosh, listen, hold on, I gotta so I have to be a little revealing because my
Okay.
playlist is not all, gospel
No, it's all good. It's all
and
good.
motivation music. I really love Cardi B.
Don't.
I
It's
love me some Cardi
unapologetic.
B,
That's okay.
and there's a song that she has called
Is this
Check
on her new
Please.
album?
It's a new album,
Okay.
and it's called Check Please, and okay,
Mhm.
the only reason why it sounds like sustainability to me is because I imagine the rise of all these sustainability companies who are going to IPO in the next 3 years and, kicking butt against the fossil fuel industry, and I'm
That's
like, one
right.
day they're gonna be like, "Give me my check. Run me my check.
Please run me
Run me
my
my check. Check,
check. I
please." And so,
love
yeah.
it. Okay. These were good. These were juicy. Thank you so much. Oh, this is so hilarious. I love it. I
Anytime.
love it.
Anytime.
Let us know, or let the folks know, how they can stay
Yeah.
connected with you and your work.
Absolutely. Please, I am very, very, very active on LinkedIn. So please definitely follow me on that platform. I also try to share tips and insights on my threads. So I'm just Sherrell_Dorsey. And, if you would love for me to ever come and talk about storytelling, teach storytelling, or moderate conversations on storytelling, you can just go to SherrellDorsey.com and also book me for a plethora of things.
I know that's right. A plethora. All
A
right.
plethora.
Thank y'all. That is a
Thank you again.
wrap. If stories make markets, then sharing this one is how we build power. Subscribe, leave a review, and send this episode to a person who needs to hear it. See you next time.
Compost and cotton and cornrows.
We've turned nothing to gold since the birth of our soul. It's ingrained in our room. Black is more than flesh and bone, planted deep in our code, and we bear the fruit. Yeah, they wonder how our stride's so bold, and our pride stone cold after all we've been through. Rich as the texture of our crown. We pass it on to the youth.